She couldn't see the man everyone called a legend, but she could feel him. When 16-year-old Linda reached out on stage in 1972 to touch Elvis Presley's face, the arena froze. What happened next made grown men cry and changed the way the world saw the king of rock forever. Las Vegas Hilton, August 12, 1972. The lights dimmed, and 15,000 people held their breath. A sea of sequins shimmered beneath the gold glow of stage lamps. The smell of hairspray, whiskey, and cigarette smoke hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. The orchestra hit the first note, and a roar thundered through the showroom. Elvis Presley walked into the light, white jumpsuit gleaming with rhinestones. For a moment, the room didn't feel real. It felt like heaven was opening for one man. Somewhere near the front, a 16-year-old girl named Linda Wrigley gripped her mother's hand. Her mother leaned close, whispering, "He's here, honey. He's right in front of us." Linda nodded softly. She couldn't see him. She never could. Born blind, she had only ever imagined the man whose voice she'd memorized from radio and vinyl records. But tonight she felt him. Every vibration of the bass trembled through her chest. Every scream from the crowd rippled across her skin like a wave. The applause felt like thunder she could touch. As the music swelled, she tilted her head upward, as if listening with her whole soul. The drums pounded. The brass cried. Then came that unmistakable voice, warm, smooth, alive. "Wise men say, only fools rush in." The audience erupted. Cameras flashed like fireflies. Couples clutched each other. Grown men yelled his name like children seeing a miracle. But Linda didn't move. Her lips trembled along with his words, whispering them back in perfect rhythm. In her mind, she could see him. The slicked-back hair, the open collar, the smile she'd built in her imagination from every photograph her mother had described. And yet, something inside her ached. She didn't want to just hear him anymore. She wanted to know him, to feel the face behind the sound that had filled her world since she was a child. Her mother squeezed her hand. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Linda smiled faintly. "He sounds happy tonight." The show rolled on, an hour of pure electricity. Elvis was in rare form, tossing scarves to screaming fans, laughing between songs, wiping sweat with the hem of his sleeve. But even through all the chaos, there was a strange calm in him that night. A calm that met Linda's quiet stillness. At one point, during Suspicious Minds, Elvis leaned into the crowd, his eyes scanning the front rows. He smiled at a little boy holding a toy guitar, winked at a lady in a red dress, then paused, just for a heartbeat, as if something invisible caught his attention. He couldn't have seen Linda clearly from where he stood, but something about her presence seemed to shift the air. Later, a fan in row 5 swore she saw Elvis glance toward the section where Linda sat, his expression softening for no reason at all. Maybe it was chance. Maybe it wasn't. When the final chords of the song faded, the audience roared again. Cameras clicked. Ushers tried to hold back the wave of fans pressing forward for one last glimpse. Linda sat quietly, hands in her lap, listening to every sound, storing it like a memory she could touch. Her mother whispered, "Do you want to go now, before it gets too crowded?" But Linda shook her head. "Not yet. I want to stay until the lights come up." For her, this was more than a concert. This was the moment she'd dreamed of for years. Being in the same room as the man whose music had painted her world in color. The band struck up the encore. "Can't Help Falling in Love." The sound rose and fell like a heartbeat. The crowd swayed. Couples held hands. Flashbulbs lit up the room like tiny stars. And through all the noise, Linda whispered under her breath, "Someday, I wish I could tell him what he means to me." Her mother looked at her and felt tears rise. But none of them, not Linda, not her mother, not even Elvis, knew that wish was about to come true. Because backstage, a single envelope was sitting on a table, written in Braille, and it had his name on it. Hours before the lights ever touched the stage, the Las Vegas Hilton buzzed like a beehive. Roadies shouted over the hum of amplifiers. Makeup artists hurried past mirrors lined with hot bulbs. A faint smell of hairspray mixed with the sweetness of Elvis's favorite peanut butter sandwich cooling on a tray. Inside the dressing room, Elvis Presley sat quietly, guitar resting across his lap. He wasn't reading a script or a set list. He was reading letters. Fan mail, hundreds stacked in piles tied with string. One envelope stood out. It wasn't white or pink like the others. It was cream-colored, thick, with small raised dots across the front. A note was taped to it. From Linda Wrigley, age 16, blind since birth. Elvis traced his fingers across the braille pattern, frowning softly. She wrote this. His bodyguard, Red West, nodded. Came in last week. She's in the audience tonight. Front row, section B. Elvis leaned back. What's it say? Red read aloud, slow and careful. Dear Mr. Presley, I can't see you, but when you sing, I feel like I can. If I could just touch your face one time, I'd finally know what the king of rock and roll looks like. For a long moment, the room went silent except for the low hum of the air conditioner. Elvis looked down at the letter again. He'd gotten thousands of fan requests before. Kisses, autographs, marriage proposals, but never this. He stood, pacing the carpet. Ain't that something? Red? All the pictures. All the shows. And this little girl just wants to feel a face. Red chuckled softly. World's crazy, E. Security won't like it. Elvis turned, eyes firm. We make sure it happens. He placed the braille letter on his makeup table beside a small silver cross. If she's here tonight, I'm gonna let her know she matters. There was a knock at the door. His stage manager peeked in. 5 minutes, E. Elvis smiled faintly. 5 minutes, huh? Long enough to make a promise. He touched the letter again, lips moving in a quiet whisper no one heard. Maybe it was a prayer. Maybe a vow. Moments later, he walked toward the stage entrance, voice echoing down the hallway. The band tuned up. Fans outside chanted his name in waves. Backstage, Red West grabbed his headset. All right, boys, if there's a girl with a cane front row, section B, that's her. You see Elvis motion, you let her through. No pushing. The sound crew exchanged looks. He's stopping the show for a fan? Red shrugged. He's stopping it for something bigger than that. The hallway lights flickered as the curtain call began. The roar from the showroom rattled the floorboards. Elvis paused behind the velvet drape, breathing deep. He looked once more at the letter in his hand, then slipped it into the pocket of his jumpsuit. He whispered, For you, Linda. The curtain began to rise. He stepped into the blinding light, guitar strap over his shoulder, the crowd's scream flooding his ears. He didn't know how or when it would happen, but somewhere out there in the front row was a girl who couldn't see him, yet somehow already knew him better than anyone else. And tonight, he intended to keep his promise. The crowd was thunder. 15,000 people stood shoulder to shoulder, lights flashing like a sky full of stars. Cameras clicked. Voices screamed. Elvis Presley took the microphone, nodding once toward the orchestra pit. The first notes of Can't Help Falling in Love shimmered through the Hilton showroom. The spotlight swept across the front row, gliding over sequined dresses and waving hands, until it paused on a young girl with dark glasses and a white cane. Linda Wrigley. She sat perfectly still, head tilted toward the sound, smiling as if she could see it. Her mother held her shoulder, whispering, That's him, baby. That's his voice right there. Elvis didn't need to be told who she was. He felt it. The same quiet energy he'd sensed during rehearsal now drew his eyes toward her. For a moment, he forgot the show. The lights, the crowd, the rhythm. All of it blurred into silence. Only her smile remained. He strummed one soft chord, his voice lowering to a whisper. Wise men say. The crowd melted into stillness. It wasn't a performance anymore. It was a prayer. Linda leaned forward, her hand gripping the stage edge. She could feel the wood vibrating beneath her fingertips with every note. When he sang the line, Take my hand, take my whole life too, her lips moved, matching the words sound for sound. Elvis saw it and something inside him cracked open. He took a slow step toward the edge of the stage. The band faltered for half a beat, confused, but he waved them to keep playing. A guard moved closer, ready to block the front row. Elvis shook his head. It's all right. The audience watched in disbelief. He never broke formation mid-song. He knelt down, just a few feet between them now. Linda's mother gasped, whispering, "Oh my Lord, he's coming over." The music softened. The brass faded. Only the piano stayed, low, trembling, intimate. Elvis stretched out his hand. "Hey, sweetheart. You must be Linda." The mic picked up every word. The crowd went dead quiet. Linda froze, unsure if she was dreaming. "Yes, sir," she whispered. He smiled gently. "May I?" She nodded. He took her small hand and placed it against his chest, right over his heartbeat. "That's me," he said softly. Her breath caught. The crowd gasped. For a second, nothing moved, not even the air. She whispered, "You're real." Elvis laughed under his breath. "So are you." The band slowed almost to silence. His voice cracked slightly as he finished the last line. "For I can't help falling in love with you." A single tear slid down Linda's cheek. The crowd erupted. Not in screams this time, but in a rolling wave of applause that sounded like rain. Elvis stood, squeezing her hand once more before letting go. "Don't go far, honey. We ain't done yet." He turned back to the microphone, his voice trembling. "Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes music's more than sound. It's a way to see." Then he sang again, stronger now, the band swelling behind him. Linda's mother buried her face in her hands. Around them, people wept openly. The entire arena became a cathedral, every soul listening, every eye fixed on the impossible moment unfolding in front of them. And yet, no one knew the real miracle hadn't even happened yet. Because when the next song began, Elvis would stop the show completely. The song ended, but no one clapped. For a long, fragile moment, 15,000 people just stared. Elvis Presley stood motionless at the edge of the stage, sweat glistening under the amber lights, his hands still hovering where Linda's had been. He looked out at the crowd, then back down at her. "Stay right there, honey," he said softly. Security shifted uncertainly. Red West, watching from the side curtain, spoke into his headset. "Hold positions. Let it happen." Elvis knelt again. He didn't care about the cameras, the strict time slots, or the VIPs in the back row. In that instant, nothing else existed. Only a blind teenage girl who had crossed oceans of sound to find him. He spoke quietly, his voice trembling. "You said you wanted to know what I look like, didn't you?" Linda nodded, her hands shaking. "Yes, sir. Just once." The crowd exhaled all at once, as if releasing years of tension. The entire Hilton showroom fell silent. Even the neon hum outside seemed to fade. Elvis leaned closer. "Well, baby, you go ahead." He guided her trembling hands toward his face. The microphone hissed softly as her fingers brushed his cheek. The skin beneath was warm and damp with sweat. Her touch moved slowly, mapping each curve, his jawline, the edge of his sideburn, the faint dimple beneath his smile. Gasps rippled through the audience. People covered their mouths. A woman in row 3 began to cry. Linda whispered, "You feel kind." Elvis swallowed hard. "I try to be." Her fingertips reached his eyes, then his lips. He closed them, letting the moment breathe. He could smell her shampoo, faint and sweet, like rain. Every flashbulb in the room went off at once. 1,000 bursts of light freezing the image that would soon circle the world. Then she smiled. "Now I know what you look like." Elvis tried to answer, but his voice cracked. "Now you know me," he finally managed. The crowd erupted, not in screams, but in sobs. People hugged strangers. Men who'd never cried before wiped their faces with napkins. Elvis stood slowly, blinking back tears. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice broke again. He looked over the microphone, eyes wet, chest heaving. "That's the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me on a stage." The orchestra, unsure what to do, began to play a soft instrumental. Just strings, trembling beneath the sound of the audience's sniffles. Elvis reached into his pocket and pulled out a silk scarf, dabbing his eyes. Then he handed it to Linda. "For you, sweetheart, so you'll always remember tonight." She held it to her heart, smiling through tears. "I don't think I'll ever forget it." He chuckled softly. "Me neither." Then something unexpected happened. The crowd began to sing. Not together, not planned. It started as a whisper, then spread like fire. "Love me tender, love me true." 15,000 voices carried the song like a single heartbeat. Elvis closed his eyes, lowering the microphone, letting them take over. Linda swayed gently with the melody, her hand still clutching the scarf. The lights softened. For once, the king didn't lead his audience, he followed them. When the song ended, he looked out into the crowd again, stunned. "You all feel that?" he asked. "'Cause I sure do." Applause thundered through the hall. But underneath the cheers, there was something deeper, reverence. He turned to Linda once more. "You showed me something tonight, honey." She tilted her head. "What's that, Mr. Presley?" He smiled, the faintest crack of a tear glistening under the spotlight. "You showed me what grace looks like." He leaned down, kissed her forehead gently, and whispered, "God bless you." Then he stepped back, nodding to the band. "Let's play one for her." The drummer counted off quietly. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the room filled again with "How Great Thou Art." But this time it wasn't entertainment. It was worship. Every note, every word, every tear that fell. They weren't part of a show anymore. They were part of a moment no camera could ever fully capture. Elvis sang the chorus like a prayer, his voice cracking, eyes fixed not on the crowd, but on the girl who'd given him back something he didn't know he'd lost. Faith. When the final note hung in the air, he raised one trembling hand. "Thank you," he whispered, barely audible through the mic. The lights dimmed. The curtain began to fall. Backstage, Red West's voice trembled through the headset. You all right?" Elvis didn't answer. He just stared at his hands, the same hands that had held hers, and whispered, "I've never been better." And as the curtain hit the floor, the king of rock and roll wept, because for the first time in years, someone had truly seen him. Backstage was never quiet, but that night it was. Elvis stepped through the curtain, chest still heaving. His white jumpsuit shimmered with sweat and glitter, his hair damp, his eyes red. For once, no one dared to joke. No one even breathed too loud. Red West handed him a towel. "You all right, E?" Elvis wiped his face, staring at the floor. "Red?" he whispered. "Did you see her?" Red nodded slowly. "Yeah." Whole world saw her. The sound of the crowd still leaked through the walls. Faint applause, the echo of 15,000 people trying to understand what they just witnessed. Elvis sat down heavily in his chair. The scarf he'd given Linda was gone, but he could still feel its absence in his hands. He opened his palm, staring at the faint imprint of her touch like it had branded him. A makeup girl peeked in. "Mr. Presley, that was—" He raised a hand gently. "Please, don't ruin it with words." He leaned forward, elbows on knees, silent for a long time. The clock on the wall ticked softly, each second a heartbeat. Finally, Red spoke. "Press'll eat this up by morning. Photo guys caught it all." Elvis shook his head. "Leching. Maybe they'll print something good for once." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the Braille letter, creased now, damp at the corners. He unfolded it carefully, running his fingers over the dots like they were holy scripture. "She gave me something, Red. Everyone wants a piece of me. Photos, stories, autographs. But that girl," his voice broke. "She didn't want nothing but to know I was real." Red leaned against the wall. "Guess she got her answer." Elvis looked up, eyes wet. "No, Red. I did." Outside, camera bulbs flashed through the backstage windows. Reporters shouted questions no one answered. By midnight, the Las Vegas Review-Journal had already gone to print. Elvis stops show for blind teen. 15,000 witness tender moment. A bootleg recording, captured on a fan's cheap cassette deck, was already circulating down the strip. You could hear the gasp, the silence, the trembling in Elvis's voice when he said, "Now you know me." Fans who weren't even there claimed they'd cried listening to it. Some said the tape healed something in them. At 3 a.m., Elvis still hadn't left. The room was dark now, only the mirror lights glowing softly. He pulled out his Bible, the pages worn and frayed. He found a verse and read it under his breath. "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." He closed the book and smiled faintly. "She did see him," he murmured. "Right through me." Red stepped closer. "You want me to send her something? Flowers, maybe?" Elvis shook his head. "No. She don't need flowers. Just make sure she gets home safe. And tell her mama I said thank you." For a moment, he stared at his reflection in the mirror. The man who looked back wasn't the king or the star or the headline. He was just a tired boy from Tupelo, Mississippi, remembering what kindness felt like. He whispered to the mirror, "Don't forget this, E. Don't ever forget this." Somewhere out front, a janitor sweeping the aisles found a white cane leaning against the stage. Linda's mother had left it by mistake. The man carried it backstage, unsure what to do. Elvis took it gently, turning it over in his hands. The handle was smooth from years of use, worn where her fingers had rested. He pressed it to his lips, then placed it beside the letter on the table. Two relics of a moment that would follow him for the rest of his life. He stood finally, exhaustion sinking into his bones. "All right, Red. Let's go home." As they walked down the hallway, the empty stage lights flickered one last time behind them. Outside, the city still pulsed with noise, but for Elvis, everything felt quiet. He looked up at the Vegas sky, still bright with neon, and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for letting me feel alive tonight. What would you have done if you were him? If one touch reminded you who you really were?" Years passed, but that night never faded. Everywhere Elvis went afterward, people mentioned the girl. They didn't talk about the cars, the fame, or the money anymore. They talked about the touch. Letters poured in, hundreds from fans who said they'd been there or wished they had. One woman wrote, "I was in the balcony, and when that girl touched his face, I felt something in my chest I can't explain." By 1973, a grainy bootleg of that concert was passing from hand to hand, copied on tape decks and shared like treasure. On the tape, you could hear it all. The hush of the crowd, the scrape of the mic stand, and that soft voice, "Now you know me." People didn't call it a concert anymore. They called it the Night of Grace. Linda and her mother moved back home to Tennessee. Local newspapers interviewed them once, but Linda stayed humble. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "He just let me touch kindness." In Memphis, a small group of fans formed what they called the Touch of Grace Foundation. It started with 4 women who sold baked goods to raise money for blind children. Within a year, Elvis quietly sent a donation, $10,000 and a handwritten note that said, "For the kids who see with their hearts." He never talked about it publicly, but those close to him noticed something change. During shows, he began to sing slower. Between songs, he'd pause, eyes closed, almost like he was praying. Sometimes, in the quiet between verses, he'd whisper, "This one's for Linda." Audiences would lean forward, unsure who he meant, but he always smiled when he said it. By the late 70s, stories of the moment had taken on a life of their own. Some swore they'd seen her at Graceland years later. Others said she'd written him letters every Christmas. No one knew for sure, but Elvis kept the Braille letter. He carried it in his Bible till the day he died. When news of his passing broke in 1977, thousands of fans gathered outside Graceland with candles and photos. But tucked among the flowers at the gate was something different. A small white cane, tied with a silk scarf. A note attached read, "For the man who let me see." No signature. Just the memory. Decades later, the Hilton would rename the showroom. But before they did, fans petitioned for a bronze plaque to be placed near the front stage. It reads, "On this spot, August 12, 1972, a blind girl touched the face of Elvis Presley. And for a moment, the world saw through her eyes." Tourists still stopped to read it. Some take pictures. Some cry quietly before moving on. Old fans say if you stand there long enough, you can almost hear the tape hiss. The faint echo of applause, a voice trembling through time. Now you know me. And maybe that's the reason the legend never really died. Because some moments aren't about fame or music or history. They're about humanity finding itself in the unlikeliest place, between two hands meeting under a spotlight. Every legend leaves an echo, but this one still sings. Elvis Presley had seen millions of faces in his lifetime, crowds that cheered his name, cameras that flashed every smile, but none of them ever showed him what being seen truly meant, until that night. Because on August 12, 1972, in a golden room filled with noise and light, a 16-year-old blind girl taught the world's biggest star how to see again. He'd been chasing perfection, applause, and adoration for years. But when Linda's hands touched his face, all of it melted away. In that silence, he wasn't the king. He was just a man finally recognized not for fame but for feeling. After that night, something in him softened. He spoke more gently. He hugged longer. He smiled slower. His shows became less about performance and more about connection. And maybe that's the quiet truth hidden inside every legend. What people remember isn't the spotlight. It's the light that lives after it fades. The girl who couldn't see had shown him a reflection no mirror could ever hold. Years later, when fans asked what moment defined his career, Elvis never mentioned the gold records, the movie deals, or the Vegas residencies. He'd just smile and say, "There was this little girl once. She reminded me what love sounds like. Love doesn't always arrive in thunder. Sometimes it comes in the hush between two heartbeats. Sometimes it's a blind girl's trembling hands and a star's quiet tears. Maybe that's the real miracle. Because in a world obsessed with being seen, the greatest gift is to be understood." And that's what Elvis found that night. Not fame, not fortune, just grace. If the story touched you, share it with someone who still believes in kindness. Maybe they'll hear what Elvis heard that night. A reminder that one gentle act can outlive every song. And if you were there, or knew someone who was, tell us how it felt when the world fell silent.